Cleared AY for 9213, hold that.
Clear, got it.
Sometimes you can tell how an outing will go right from the start. This is the entrance of Yeoman Yard off the Tampa Terminal Sub, from here to East Tampa, further south known as the Palmetto Sub. Rounding the curve is the all-too-familiar Tropicana juice train on its last few yards of its trip to the destination here in Tampa. Hello again, rail fans. So much for a normal intro, but that's just the way things go sometimes when rail fanning. It's February 22nd, 2023, and we've come south on word of a very special train that's planned on a very special line. But before any of the executive festivities are to begin, the locals are clearing up. First is L700, the Tampa to Bradenton turn, known as the Juice Train. However, today he'd have more freight than juice, with a total of 18 juice reefers and 32 mixed freight cars. A turn into Uceda Road would reveal this train with only seconds to set up. For once, this guy was running somewhat on time, arriving in Tampa around 1:30 p.m., about the same time CSX local train Y191 was ready to depart. He'd be waiting on a yard track while some maintenance of way equipment snuck into the yard on the bypass track. I'd hear over the radio that these guys were told to get off the track as the train of the day neared Valrico. So with affirmation that all on-track equipment was off and L700 was clear of the switch, Y191 would depart for Rockport Yard. Trains like this Y191 are usual noontime trains, departing the yard for customers close in on branch lines out of the yard, today's being the Tampa Terminal Sub, and the 2.5 miles south to Rockport. There are numerous customers in there, like Infra Metals Company, located between Rockport and Palm River, today receiving those 3 loaded steel cars.
22 into CSX 6556, medium clear off TS lead, leaving Yeoman Yard, entering the main track, Tampa Terminal Subdivision southbound now.
With the yard going back to its usual atmosphere of slow switching, we drive east to the other end of the yard at 78th Street, where my friend Dakota would be waiting on us and the executive varnish. In moments, a call of the dispatcher would tell us that the train was past Valrico, rolling physically westbound but timetable south under the symbol P00121. This symbol used to be the identification for the tri-weekly Sunset Limited, which ran into Florida via the Tallahassee sub, but ever since 2005, that service has been suspended. Now the CSX OCS, short for Office Car Special, uses the odd ID.
P00121 engine, CSXT number 1, JS Bond. Release your authority, all tracks from the south welcome yard limits to SAS south into Valrico. T46CMC, over.
So now we know that our train is clear of Valrico and heading straight for us. In a matter of minutes, the unmistakable headlight orientation of one of CSX's pompous F40PHs would peek around the corner at YN, symboling the arrival of the company's executive train. This train was all business today, as a crew van was waiting in Yeoman with a fresh crew ready to take the train south to Bradenton via TS, East Tampa, and the many rivers that this century-old Atlantic coastline Maine crosses. Today, the line's mileposts start at AZA 879.8 and head south to AZA 918. And while it's one straight main down to Bradenton, it's separated in two, with the first 6 miles of trackage being the Tampa Terminal Sub from Yeoman to East Tampa, and the Alafia River Bridge there. From across the river in Gibsonton, south 32 miles to Bradenton and the Tropicana facilities there, it's known as the Palmetto Sub, which hosts water crossings, the Big Bend power plant, and some of the most Floridian scenery you'll see in the Tampa area. We'd hop down to the first crossing along this AZA line at TS Crossing, where at one point the seaboard crossed the Atlantic coastline at grade in order for each railroad to access their respective yards. Now it's the first signal on the line and the location of a tight curve where today's white-collar train would be swinging south. But first, since the entirety of the Palmetto sub is non-signal trackage, also referred to as dark territory, P001 will need to get an EC1 from the dispatcher.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. DM Terrazoli, the AZA 879.3 with the CSX 0001. Ready to take it to Bradenton. Over. All right. EC1 number 80212. 80212. Today is day 2/22/23. Y'all are at the AZA 879.3. P001 21 engine CSXT number 1. Terrazoli, Circle Line 1A, operate main track, both directions. Between the NAS East Tampa on the main and the AZA 916.8 on the main. Over.
An EC1 is railroad dialect for an official permission slip from the dispatcher to operate on the stated portion of track. Today, P001 is getting permission all the way to the bottom, where Tropicana has its infamous Bradenton facilities, and where the train will be able to run around its engines for the return trip north. The picturesque blue skies and white clouds would make for a perfect afternoon to film this train, so we'd attempt to navigate through the busy intersections of State Road 60 and 50th Street until we were back ahead of the train. Heading south on US 41, the train would get way ahead of us, calling the Alafia River Bridge tender before we'd even pass Rockport. By this time, the train was at least 5 miles ahead of us, so we thought about turning around and heading back to Tampa instead of needing to drive way south just to catch it again. That would be the plan for about 5 seconds as we'd hear P001 call a stop red indication at the Alafia Bridge. Apparently, the train got down to the river so quickly that the tender hadn't had enough time to swing the bridge into place and guarantee that it was locked. So the signals would never change their usual stop indication, and P001 would have to abide. Frankly, this would be a miracle, as the train was put on standby from the bridge tender as the span locked into place for the rail movement. The stop would total to about 6 minutes, giving us just enough time to pull into Gibsonton ahead of the train. Gibsonton is one of my favorite spots as it hosts a well-maintained landscape with some very nice Florida vegetation like palmetto bushes and palm trees that parallel the right-of-way through town. The early afternoon light here would get even better as we set up for our executive varnish once again. I knew that once the train would clear Gibsonton, it would be a hard chase, as the line was clear for 40 miles an hour running all the way south, and not wanting to drive all the way to Bradenton, we'd start heading back towards Tampa to relax for a bit before the OCS's return trip. Driving back north, we'd hear that Y191 from earlier, getting ready to head back to Tampa from Rockport, so we at least had some sort of action during our wait for the northbound trek of the OCS. By the time we got to Rockport, this is all we saw. Y191 was already out of the yard and heading north. This is one of the reasons why using a radio when rail fanning is crucial to know what's happening.
Yes, sir. If we can, I'd like to leave Rockport, head to Yeoman, NSCS. We do need to stop and work one on the way. Over.
All right, signal out of Rockport, one stop, and into TS. Come on.
Y191 22 engine CSXT 6556, approach slow. Step in the Y, Rockport, northbound out.
During his talk with the dispatcher, 191 stated that he had one stop to make before entering Yeoman. Seeing the train again would tell me that he still had those steel cars from earlier, so that's what his stop would be, switching out the steel customer near Palm River. I knew I had some time to spare, so instead of trying to get a shot of 191 passing one of the few crossings between the short distance from the river and Yeoman, I'd set up on the US 41 bridge over Palm River. While traffic is heavy and loud, the bridge has a bike lane for bikers and walkers to safely cross with cement separations. After a quick inspection, we decided that the bridge was fairly safe and the shot was worth the eternal noise of this busy road. The sun would be on our side, making for a perfectly lit scene as the yard job crossed the bridge with more vibrant scenery in the foreground.
CSX Office.
191, leaving in for battle, we got 6.
Okay. Permission north lead, run around the using 3 pocket. Send your cars off into 14. Prior to the box off, working with the L783.
By far, my favorite thing about this AZA line is all the water crossings, and I'm happy to say that now I've documented all 4 main bridges between Bradenton and Tampa. We knew it would be another hour or so before P001 returned, so I take the time to check out some spots that I had been wanting to see in the area and to relax in the afternoon breeze next to the bay. By the time we had gotten a bite to eat and checked out said spots, it'd be about time to start heading south to our photo spot that I had picked out earlier in the day for P001's return trip, hearing that he had just cleared Ruskin, about 20 miles south of our location. This is Sutton Siding, where here at the north end is where the Rockport Y breaks out from the siding track and stems in Rockport Yard, where that Y191 job came out of. These signals are known as the north end of Sutton, as just a couple hundred feet north of us, the siding singles into the main for the last 2 miles before arriving in Tampa. This is the crossing of St. Paul Street, which is a really nice spot in the afternoon light with visible signals in each direction, indicating the approaching action from Rockport Yard and trains on the main line. One of those signals is quite rare, as an old dwarf signal still guards the siding at the north end. In late 2021, CSX replaced all of its old signals on this line, from TS all the way to Bradenton, replacing everything from approach signals to the old single heads that used to be right here at Sutton. For some reason, however, the dwarf signal here was never taken out, to the delight of many, including me, as seeing one of these old signals still on the job in 2023 is quite the nice sight. Today, the dwarf signal would not change aspects, however, as P001 is approaching on the main, and gets this yellow over yellow known as an advanced approach, telling the crew to be prepared to stop at the second signal ahead, where a restricting indication will greet the executives into the yard.
21, CSX2, clear south into Sutton, advanced approach north into Sutton, main to main northbound.
Now, since the main track is a stub end in Bradenton, the siding next to the Tropicana plant would be used for the engines to run around the train. So the consist would end up being pulled backwards, with CSX number 2 leading north, and the window car, which is usually at the end of the train, is right behind the locomotives now. So as the golden light shined off the top of the rails, here came P001 rolling back north to Tampa for another overnight stop before heading back to Waycross the next morning.
21, go my over.
With our last shot of P001 in the archives now, we'd begin to pack up as the fading light wouldn't produce any more trains in the area until sundown. Or so we thought. Waiting on P001 in the yard would be weekday local L783, the Palmetto sub-local, today running a few hours late due to his abnormally large consist. I had heard this train since 3 p.m. and now at 6 it was just departing with an uncommon 6-axle motor on point.
L78322, Jeff.
783-22, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Have the 7510 in the lead. Let's see about getting the line from East Tampa down to the AZA 893 and underneath the Big Bend siding.
Okay, here we go. CF out.
All right, thanks, Rick. 73.
With an EC1 to head all the way south to Bradenton and permission to switch in and out of Big Bend siding, L783 would roll south past us in the last moments of golden light. With 37 cars for numerous industries along the line, it would make for a long night for today's crew. However, not for us, as after an eventful afternoon and chasing and catching some really nice trains, it was our time to head home for a hot dinner. It's not often that we're able to do a day like this, considering today is a Wednesday and our day started around 1 p.m. But sometimes you get unlucky, and sometimes there's days like today, where things just seem to work out. So here along the AZA Main, with the last of L783 clearing Sutton, this is Christian from Multicolor Films. End of transmission.